Has your ex ever used your children as an excuse to either see or speak to you when you're no longer together? Have they ever used your child or your children to spy on you or to relay messages? If so, your children are being used as pawns in post-separation cycle of abuse. Welcome to the Empowered and in Control podcast, the podcast that helps people who have been impacted by domestic abuse to heal and regain power and control after an abusive relationship. I'm your host, Oriana, your favorite domestic violence expert, speaker, and owner of To Rise Advocacy and Consulting. Now, there's a big difference between being a concerned and protective parent who is asking your child questions to determine their safety and using them as surveillance or even as co-abusers. I've worked in this field for quite some time, and I've heard some of the wildest stories of how abusive parents have used their children to further abuse their ex. I've heard stories of children being sent with the parent, if they're still together, being sent with the parent to make sure that he or she is not cheating, right? I've heard stories of children having to relay messages between the parents, or more specifically, the abusive parent telling the child, well, you need to tell your dad this, or you need to tell your mom that. The children are not supposed to be the ones to relay messages. There's communication between parties for a reason. Now, that further complicates things when there's an order of protection in place, right? Because if there's an order of protection, those two parties are not able to communicate. And so in a lot of those cases, you'll see that the respondent is using the children to relay messages to the petitioner. That's not allowed either. An order of protection is no contact, period, through anyone, through a carrier pigeon, doesn't matter. No messages are to be relayed. But a lot of people are using their children for that. What about children being taught to and rewarded for victim blaming? So there have been situations where I have seen that children are included in that process of making a victim feel bad about themselves, making them feel bad about their parenting. So just as an example, the webinar that I did on the impact of domestic abuse on children, in that episode, I talked about a young lady who said that her 3-year-old was having a temper tantrum. And during that temper tantrum, he was mad at her for not getting his toy back. And he told her, I'm going to get daddy to beat you up again. Those are the type of things that kids are being included in. Somehow this 3-year-old has learned that not only is that the way to get mommy to do what I want her to do, I'm on daddy's side, right? And so that 3-year-old has unknowingly and unwittingly become part of that cycle of abuse for her. Hey, the Empowered and in Control wheel and its guide is a hopeful tool that I developed for people who are impacted by domestic abuse. It's a healing-centered tool that creates a pattern of positive behaviors that people can use to regain power and control after an abusive relationship. Click the link in the description to get your copy for yourself or for someone that you know who is struggling to move forward after the trauma of an abusive relationship. You can be empowered and in control again. There are also situations where children are participating in it because whatever's been done to the victim, the abuser is telling the child, that's her fault or that's his fault. He caused me to do that. It's his fault because if he would have done this or that, then I wouldn't have had to do that, and vice versa. And then you have children who are very angry and upset with the victim in that situation. And so they're using the children against the victim as part of the way that they abuse. And this happens whether the people are together in the same house or whether they're separated. Children are being used as pawns all the time. And so if it's a situation where your child is talking to you, first of all, as if they're an adult on your level, right? Talking to you as if they're that person. It's almost like you can hear that person's voice coming out of your child because they're telling you that you should do this and you shouldn't do that, and why didn't you do this or that. That is more so an indication that that's what they're being told. And you know this. I don't have to tell you. If you're living it, then you see it every day. So what do you do about it? Well, there are a few things that I want to recommend. First of all, document everything. Everything. And the reason I say that is because, especially when it comes to courts want to see, they want documentation that you are trying to be a protective parent. Not a vindictive parent, but a protective one. And so if you are able to bring in court situations, bring to the court that this is how this person is using our child against me, then they're going to have to take that into consideration when it comes to whatever it is that you're trying to, whatever remedy that you're trying to get, whether that's filing for an order of protection or whether it's in a custody hearing. Document everything. Even with Department of Children's Services or Child Protective Services, they want to know that you're being a protective parent. And so you'll have to be able to prove in some way or another that the children are being used for surveillance or being used to relay messages when that's not something that they should even be expected to do, let alone have it be commonplace. That's something that I want to talk about in this upcoming webinar, the impact of domestic abuse on children. On May 29th at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, I'll be having a webinar on Zoom, and you can click the link to get your tickets through Eventbrite. We're going to talk about intergenerational trauma. We're going to talk about the adverse childhood experiences and the lessons that children are learning in abusive homes. But we're also going to talk about the healing side of things. So we will be talking about the positive childhood experiences and the things that we can do to support and protect children. So click the link to get your tickets for the Impact on Domestic Abuse on Children webinar on May 29th. Bye, y'all. That documentation can make a big difference. And one app that I would recommend, highly recommend, is called Our Family Wizard. That app is something that I recommend to just about any and everybody that I know who is co-parenting with an abuser, right? If your ex is an abusive person and you're having to co-parent with them, you'll want to look into the Our Family Wizard app. That app was created specifically for co-parenting. And the idea behind it is that all communication has to go through that app. Any communications between the two of you about the children, because that's the only reason that you guys would have to communicate, right? Is about the kids, the minor children. So all communication would go through that app. If you have, for example, an order of protection in place or protection order in place, and you also have the Our Family Wizard app, and there's any communication, any threats, any communication at all that does not go through that app, then you would be able to take that documentation, take that screenshot, the text, the voicemail, whatever it is, back to the order of protection court and say, this person is contacting me and we have this app, which is the only way that this person is supposed to be communicating with me. The other thing about the app is that it is completely discoverable, which means that everything that's communicated in that app is something that anybody in court can see. As in terms of the judge, the attorneys for both sides, it's something that they can request the transcript for that. So you'll definitely want to take a look into the app itself and what the features are to determine whether or not it's something that's right for you. But it also has a calendar in there, and that's for all the appointments. If you have doctor's appointments, the kids have, or if the kids have doctor's appointments, if they have different things for school, activities, things like that, it can all go in this calendar, and you guys manage that calendar within the app. No communication needed outside of that app. And again, the idea behind it is to cut down on the amount of communication that's happening that's not about the kids. And if somebody has a problem with participating in this or having that app, that tells you something right there. Because again, a lot of abusive parents, a lot of abusive people in general have control issues. They don't want to be told what they can and cannot do. And this app is another way for them to have to comply and do what the app says that it has to do. You can't communicate outside of this app. And so if there's pushback on that, that tells you something as well. That also should tell the attorney something. It should tell the court something if that person is wanting to circumvent that or not have that app. Don't let the cost be a deterrent, because yes, there is a cost to it, but they also have scholarships or grants or something available where you can get access to it if you apply to be able to have access to the app for free. There are also some agencies that may have funding for that, so they may foot the bill for that. So don't let the cost of the app be a deterrent from going that route or to investigating that. But less communication outside of that app can also lead to less physical assault, domestic assault that happens, because we know that a lot of domestic assaults happen when the children are being exchanged. That's why we highly recommend a neutral third party to exchange the kids instead of both parents doing it, right? Because if your abusive ex is communicating with you and you don't have the app and they're saying, well, I just want to see my child, I haven't seen him or her, and I need you to bring them to me, XYZ. Now, you know this person even better than I do. And you know that it's not about the child. They don't want to see the child. Half the time when you drop the child off, they leave the child with a relative while they go do what they want to do. So obviously it's not about the child. You and I both know that. Thank you so much for watching the Empowered and in Control podcast. Hey, have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? When people recommended it to me, I had no idea where to start. I didn't know anything about podcasting. And then I saw the ads for the My Seven Figure podcast. Now, seven figures did pique my interest, but I had no idea how people were making money podcasting. What really got me was the idea of being able to help so many more people through a podcast. So I signed up for the course and the community. It is so thorough, let me tell you. From branding to making sure that it's legally protected to monetizing, they left no guesswork and no excuses. So click the link in the description to sign up for My Seven Figure Podcast course and invest in your future. There are podcasts about everything, but there are certain things that people only want to hear from you. So get started today. People need to hear your voice. I both know that. But you decide, because you're an empathetic person and you feel that, you want their child to have their mother or their father in their life, you decide to meet up with that person. That person immediately has no interest in the child. They want to talk to you about what you've been doing, about who you've been with, about why you're not getting back together, why you're not responding to their text messages. Everything is about the two of you, nothing about the child, right? That's when sometimes things escalate to there becoming a physical assault, a physical altercation. The Our Family Wizard app, and I am not a paid endorser of the app. I receive nothing for talking about it other than the satisfaction of knowing that people who didn't know about it will now know about it and hopefully be able to take advantage of that to cut down on the amount of communication and, in-person interaction with an abusive ex. The last thing that I'm going to mention is seeking advocacy services. You don't have to live in shelter in order to get services from a domestic violence shelter or advocacy group. Somebody asked me about that earlier today, and they were saying that somebody needed some services, and I recommended that they go to, the local shelter. And she said, well, she doesn't want to go into shelter. No, I get that, and that's fine. But most shelters have services that are set up for people who live in shelter and also for those who do not. So you don't have to go into shelter in order to get some of these services, some of the financial services, some of the advocacy services, the court services. One of the things that I brought up to her is that a lot of shelters have connections with attorneys who will do divorces pro bono. They'll do it for free. And most attorneys, if not all, have to do some pro bono work in order to continue their licensure. So there are some agencies that have partnerships with attorneys who that's something that they're passionate about. Domestic violence or intimate partner violence is something that is a personal cause for them, and they may do pro bono work. That's something to look into instead of immediately thinking that I'm going to have to pay for this divorce. There may be other ways where you don't have to pay for the divorce. I will say those services are only as good as the person providing them. So make sure you check out whoever the attorney is, see what their track record is, not in terms of wins and losses necessarily as much as whether or not there's someone who truly is empathetic to domestic violence causes and the barriers that come along with those. But seek those advocacy services to find out what things they can offer you that maybe you didn't know about. What services for your children. But the most important thing to make sure that you get is counseling for your children. That is the most important thing. When children are growing up in abusive households, there's already a lot of trauma that they're enduring. And so counseling can help them to process what they have seen and been through, and also address the lessons that they've been learning to make sure that they don't repeat those same patterns, that same cycle of abuse. But even children who are not living in the household with both parents still need counseling, especially if they are being used in the cycle of abuse, because they're going to need that professional assistance to be able to process how they feel about the abusive parent and how they feel about the non-abusive parent. Because if they've been taught to blame that person as well, then there's going to be a strained relationship with both parents. So my thought is that when you are dealing with an abusive ex and there are children involved, it becomes way more complicated. But there are things that you can do. The things that I listed are some of the things that you can do. But seeking those advocacy services might help you think of things that are specific to your situation. I'm having a webinar on May the 29th at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. You can click the link to get your tickets through Eventbrite. And in that webinar, it's called The Impact on Domestic Abuse on Children. We'll talk about intergenerational trauma. We talk about the link between domestic abuse and child sex abuse. We'll talk about the adverse childhood experiences and the lessons that kids are learning in these abusive households. But we'll also talk about positive childhood experiences and the things that you can do to make sure that you're supporting your child and that you're being protective of your child and doing everything you can to give them the opportunity to break the cycle of exploitation and abuse that you may have experienced in your relationship. Well, I hope this has been helpful for you. Please, by all means, comment below whether this is something that you have experienced, if it's something that you're a child survivor of this. I know I am. I have plenty of stories that I could tell you about the ways in which we were used as pawns as well. So, like I said, by all means, please drop in the comments whether or not this was helpful for you. If you feel like you know somebody who is in this situation and needs this information, send them the link send them to the podcast so that they can watch all of the episodes that may apply to them, so that they can get resources and find out ways to better support their kids and to advocate for themselves and for their kids. Again, the webinar is another great thing to direct them to. So hopefully this has been helpful. I will see you guys next week. Bye.